Today we look at NBA records that can physically never be broken again, whether it's because of rule changes, how the game is played, or just the greatness of players. Whatever it is, there's reasons why each of these records are literally impossible for anyone to ever break again, and will stand in NBA history forever as unbreakable. Like Mark Eaton's NBA record for most blocks per game for an NBA season with 5.6 in 1985. A record that's quite literally impossible for anyone to ever break again. And no rule changes affect this one, it's just mainly because the way the game is played has changed. In the 80s and 90s, the league was dominated by big men and scoring within the paint. Well, with the amount of threes and perimeter shots taken now, even if someone came into the league and was the greatest shot blocker of all time, there just wouldn't be enough opportunities anymore for them to average almost 6 blocked shots a game. In 1985, there was 3 3-pointers a game being attempted. Well, these days there's about 30, and not even to mention how much the mid-range shot has just disappeared over the years. So that's nearly 30 less shots around the rim these days, and it shows up in the stats too. The highest average for blocks per game in recent memory was 3.7 by Hassan Whiteside in 2016, and nobody's even gotten close to 4 a game in the past 20 years. And it also has a lot to do with the fact that Mark Eaton was 7'4", and we just don't see players tall enough anymore to come into the league and put up those type of numbers because of all the reasons I mentioned earlier. The game is stretched out and sped up so much that big men that size usually just don't fit in, and if they do, it's guys like Boban Marjanovic who can't keep up so plays limited minutes, or Porzingis who mainly just stretches the floor and plays out on the perimeter. Rasheed Wallace also holds the NBA record for most technical fouls in a season, which will absolutely never be broken or come close to again, because he set this astronomical record in 2001. Well, in 2010, the league changed the rules and said that any 2 technical fouls after your 16th will lead to a 1-game suspension. So when you reach 16, that's 1 game. If you get 18 techs, that's another game. Then again at 20 and so on. Meaning that if somebody were to get 42 technical fouls in the NBA in 1 year, they would have gotten suspended 14 games. Meaning they would have needed to get 42 technicals in only 68 games, which seems highly unlikely. Because I'm thinking after number 20, if you're a role player, you're getting benched for the season. And if you're a star, after like 25, if you're still getting suspended games, I could see the coach just taping your mouth shut at that point. I mean, the most you hear about a player getting these days is 16 or 17, and that's from the loudest mouths in the NBA. Guys like Kevin Durant and Draymond Green. So for someone to come along and get almost triple that, it's just not going to happen. What's also not going to happen is for someone to ever come along and break John Stockton's all-time career assist record with 15,806 assists. I know we once thought the all-time points record was unbreakable, and now LeBron's on his way to break it next season, but this one's different because there's so many variables that add up just to make this one untouchable. Let's first start off by mentioning that John's record is 3,000 assists above second all-time Jason Kidd, who's one of the all-time greats. And here's how John did that. There's 3 things to thank. First, of course, is his teammate Karl Malone. The two were one of the most dynamic duos in all of NBA history, and because of their pick and roll game, they were an unstoppable duo, and John became the all-time assist leader. That play for them was also a big reason why John is known as such a great passer, and the other reason is because, well, he was such a great passer. Adding up to him having historic assist seasons, averaging over 14 a game twice in his career, which was an NBA record, and over 13 a game 3 other times in his career. And to go along with all this, John Stockton is also the 2nd all-time leader in NBA history for assists per game, while also being the 5th all-time player in games played. So when you combine those two together, and it's when magic happens. But wait, there's more. It just so happens to help that Karl Malone was also the 6th all-time in games played. So for anyone to recreate this, they'd need a masterful scoring teammate to play together with them for 20 years on the same team, to be a great passer, to almost never get injured, and to be consistently a great player their entire career. It also goes without saying that Wilt Chamberlain's record for scoring 50 points per game is also impossible at this point for anyone to ever break for obvious reasons. But listen to this. Wilt also holds the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th spots for most points in a season. And in its 50 point per game year, it included 45 50+ point games. But what makes that stat even crazier is the fact that that's more 50-point games than any other player has ever had in NBA history. Wilt had 118 in his career. Second best is Michael Jordan with 31. So Wilt had more 50-point games than MJ did in 1 year of his career. But also in that very same season, he recorded another impossible unbreakable NBA record when he recorded 48.5 minutes per game, when there's of course only 48 minutes in an NBA game, which means he played in every single minute of every single game and overtime of the 1962 NBA season. Well, except for one game where he missed 8 minutes because he got ejected. And with what we know about preserving guys' bodies and trying to maintain injuries, this would never ever happen again in today's game. It's rare for a star player today to even play all 48 minutes of one game. I mean, 2010 was the last time a player even played over 40 minutes a game when Monte Ellis played 40.3. Sure, the style back then may have been a little slower paced and a little more laid back, but let's give credit to Wilt where it's due, because he also holds the top 7 spots for most minutes per game in a season, and only had 1 major knee injury in his entire career. So no matter how good a player is, how durable they are, or how bad they'd want this record, even if they did, no head coach would keep their job long enough to let this one happen. But now let's take things to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. For the shortest amount of time ever played in an NBA game before fouling out, which is a record record held by Bubba Wells for the time of 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Because Mavs coach Don Nelson was putting the hack-a-shack on Dennis Rodman, so he checked Wells into the game, and in just under 3 minutes later, he was out. They fouled Dennis every opportunity they got, and this one's not being broken anytime soon either because he was just the 15th man on the roster and only put in that night 2 fouls. Plus, the hack-a-shack really isn't used that much these days anyways. But speaking of the hack-a-shack, that's what helped Dwight Howard achieve his own NBA record that he'll hold forever, when he attempted a record 39 free throws in an NBA game. Because Dwight was shooting 49% from the free throw line in 2012 and 57% from the field, so it only made sense to foul him. And they literally did that all night long, pretty much the whole time he was in the game. And he actually did this, attempting 39 free throws in a game again 1 year later while he was playing for the Lakers against his old Orlando Magic team, making 21 out of 39 in the first and going 25 for 39 in the second. But the reason this one will never be broken is because away from the ball foul rules were changed, because now teams get a free throw and possession of the ball for any off-ball foul committed in the last 2 minutes of any quarter. Before, the rule was just for the fourth quarter, so now that's 6+ minutes of game time that the other team is allowed to hack-a-shack a player. And I don't think anyone will ever take that many free throws in that short amount of time. But while speaking of all these fouls, we have one more foul record that is literally impossible to be broken, because a guy named Kyle Bodler was playing his 5th NBA game and he picked up 6 fouls. But the scorekeeper that night miscounted, so he stayed in the game until he picked up his 7th personal and actually fouled out. So he holds the record for most fouls in a single game. Now, Cal only played 2 minutes and recorded no stats before he actually fouled out for the second time, so he didn't really affect the game. But for this record to be broken, someone would have to get 8, and no scorekeeper would make that mistake. Now, the scorekeeper had the easiest night of his career back in 2011 when Joel Anthony played 29 minutes in a game for the Heat and recorded no stats. 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 blocks, and 0 steals. Dude just ran up and down the court for half an hour and on paper had no impact on the game. He was playing on the Heat super team, so it makes sense that he wouldn't get the ball much and all, but it would make more sense if he wasn't a center. How does a 6'10" center get no blocks and no rebounds? Not too sure, but he holds the record for most minutes played without a single stat being recorded, and I can't ever see another player playing more minutes and having complete zeros across the board. Now, an NBA player that couldn't possibly do more was Bill Russell, because he has the NBA record for most rings won as a player with 11, and the next 6 guys on that list for most rings all time were all of his teammates. Besides that, Robert Horry holds the most with 7, and nobody's touching Russell's record again. It included 8 straight titles, which in itself is a record, and I mean, Bill only played 13 seasons in the league, meaning he won a title in 85% of his NBA seasons, and if guys like Michael Jordan or LeBron couldn't do that, no one will. Now, 11 rings as a coach is almost just as impressive, because Phil Jackson came in and won 6 rings with Michael Jordan, then 5 with Kobe Bryant years later. Not even to mention how he also won 2 as a player, which gives him the most rings all time with 13. But for now, we're just talking about his 11 while coaching. The luck that he had to coach the GOAT, then get the job to coach Shaq and another top 10 player of all time is wild. Then finally, we have Robert Parrish, who accomplished an insane feat of most points ever scored without a three-pointer with 23,334. And right off the bat, just knowing how the game's played today, this one's permanently set in stone as an impossible record. Even for big men today, for the most part, you have to know how to shoot threes to survive. And if not, there's always the late blowout game where they mess around and will usually make one anyways. Shaq did it, Dwight Howard did it, a lot of big men do. But to score 23,334 points without a three made sense in the 80s and 90s. What would a big man be doing shooting threes back then? But now that's completely changed. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.